Hello everyone, my name is Martin Lundfall and I am a formal verification researcher at DAPHub. And DAPHub does a couple of things. One of the most prolific things that we do, I think, is developing the smart contracts for a project called MakerDAO. So I'm in charge of verifying that those contracts are correct. And if you want to talk about that's not something I'm going to be talking about today, but I'd be happy to talk about that if anybody wants to just get a hold of me after this talk. But today I'll be speaking about another project that I'm a part of, which is called Circles, a universal basic income based cryptocurrency, which we're building on Ethereum right now. I know I'm wearing an Archain t-shirt, but this is all Ethereum based so far. And this talk will go over some topics that are maybe more tangentially related to blockchains and in particular to the basic income project, because we'll be talking about values quite a lot. We'll be talking about games, both from a game theoretic standpoint and also from a little bit of an anthropological standpoint, and then go into a theory of value, and the anthropological theory of value I like a lot. It's by David Graeber. We'll speak about that. It essentially deals with what the difference is between values and value, so mapping what we usually speak of as economic value to the social values. Or other kinds of values that we might speak of more generally. And then from that I'll get to the motivation behind Circles, and only after I've described what Circles is, I'll actually speak about universal basic income and why we really should strive very hard for making universal basic income happen as soon as possible. And I think we'll have time for questions in the end, but if anybody has something that they want to say before that, then feel free to just raise your hand and I'll make this a little bit more participatory than otherwise. Cool. So, we begin with a question of value, and now I'm not asking the question of how much is a blockchain worth, because that's easy to check out using CoinMarketCap, at least if we believe that the market cap is somewhat representative of any sort of financial value actually being realized. You know, probably not, but it's at least an indicator of financial value. But when I ask this question, what is the value of a blockchain, then I'm asking a more question about what is it about the disintermediation and the fact that we can now make contracts between humans without a third party to rely on that we really like. What is it about this that is so appealing? Because there are plenty of people in this space that all come with different motivations. And a lot of the times people are sort of starting to realize that a lot of the other people that they're working with might have entirely different motivations in building stuff that is blockchain related or generally putting stuff on the blockchain. So my answers to these questions, I mean, of course there are plenty of use cases and value in putting things on a blockchain. Disintermediation I mentioned, and collaboration under a specified set of rules, and generally engaging in contracts between people is something that we've done for a really long time. But now we have a mechanism for doing that programmatically. And that's not really to say that it's trustless, because these contracts, at least the way they are written right now, requires really a lot of insight into the way the whole system is governed in order to really be sure that they will operate the way you intend them to. And it's quite rare when you engage in contract with another person that the power balance is really equal. There's usually one person that is writing the contract and giving it to the other person, saying like, hey, this is the terms of our agreements, and unless values and intentions are aligned to begin with, which they probably aren't, because then there wouldn't be a need for a contract in the first place, one person often tries to screw the other person over, and if there are informational asymmetries, then that's going to be utilized by the person writing the contract, most likely. So the sense in which this collaboration is more efficient or more equal or just in the blockchain space is dependent on the fact that both parties have perfect information about what the contract actually means, and this is actually rarely the case. So that's a point to notice. Often we speak about incentivizing certain behavior also. Again, getting back to the point about game theory and mechanism design. I was asked to give this presentation and focus a little bit more on mechanism design than I usually do. And I will do that to some extent, but I think I will more speak about the underlying assumptions of game theory and the things that people take for granted when we speak about the way actors are incentivized. Because there's plenty of psychological things that motivate people also that might not be measured in a dollar value. But it's a useful simplification. But ultimately, I think something that captures a lot of the things that we're trying to do is solving coordination problems. And so I'll begin with talking about the first game theoretic concept of a coordination problem. Many of you probably already know this, but a coordination problem is a game. So it has a couple of players, and they all have some sort of incentive to do something. There's a utility function, and you can measure the outcomes that they have. And in a coordination game, the players are, the main point is that the players should coordinate their behavior. They should choose their decisions in a coordinated way, and that's the way that they're going to end up benefiting from the thing. I found this picture of a coordination game whether two people, when they're introducing themselves, should shake hands or bow, and I liked it because it's a very silly example. But so if you're introducing yourself to another person, the important thing is that you do the same greeting as them, because if you go for a bow and they go for a handshake, then it's kind of awkward, and if you go for a handshake and they go for a bow, then it's also kind of awkward. But as long as you do the same thing, then everything is going to be fine and you're going to have a good time. So it only matters that you do the same thing, and this is also true for a lot of other types of games. When it comes to driving conventions or spelling conventions, the important thing is that everybody agrees on what to do and not necessarily which choice you're making. And so this is a big part of what I think blockchains can provide. They can provide us with a way to make these decisions in a coherent way. We can specify the rules of engagement in any sort of social situation, and we can make sure that we make the decision that is mutually beneficial to us. And global warming is another example, because really nobody wants the planet to get destroyed, but still it's in everybody's incentive to sort of deviate from that goal if they have profit in doing so. And usually if everybody else commits to be a environmentally friendly company, then you can assume that the world isn't going to be destroyed as a company regardless of what you do. So if you pollute or if you do some environmental destruction, then that might not be so bad for you, because the world isn't going to be destroyed simply based on your behavior, and then you're going to have a more efficient production cost, a more efficient production process, and so you'll benefit more than that. But if we have these contracts of engagement where everybody can pre-commit to a certain type of behavior, a certain strategy in the game, then hopefully we can alleviate people going off protocol. Before I go to monetary systems, there's also some points about proof of stake, of course. It's all about not necessarily a coordination game as much as it is an exercise in mechanism design. Mechanism design sometimes being referred to as a reverse game theory, where you try to create rules so that the best strategy for all the players is to create this behavior that you want. In the case of proof of stake, you want everybody to share information in such a way that you reach consensus, and then you try to form the protocol of proof of stake so that it is in everybody's best interest to follow the protocol and to reach consensus rather than behaving in a Byzantine way. Monetary systems is another large problem when it comes to a coordination game. I mean, it's a coordination game essentially because it doesn't matter so much to some extent which currency you're using or which monetary system you're using. The thing that makes a monetary system useful or a currency useful is that everybody else is using it as the default notion of value so that you can exchange goods with other people, because money is essentially a Schelling point and currency is a Schelling point. So as long as you all make the same decision, then you're going to be fine. You know, with a lot of exceptions, but in the base case, that's sort of the property of money. So this is all in the traditional sort of microeconomics of game theory, but usually there are some aspects of games that are forgotten whenever we do these types of analyses, and that's that we pre-commit to a lot of notions. We speak about the utility function and we speak about people being incentivized for certain types of behavior, but when we look at the underlying cause of those incentives, then we really have to make sure that the notion of value that we have is essentially justified. Because every game puts us in a certain state of mind. If we're playing Twister, then we're going to be acting a lot different than if we're playing chess, even though we might have, you know, the same idea of what winning is. There's certainly a different frame of mind that we're put when we're playing that game. And so many argue, and I would argue, that one of the fundamental problems of the economy, well, there are a couple, but essentially we only have this monolithic game that we're all playing of some form of state capitalism right now, and it's putting us all in the mindset of maximizing our own profit, and that mindset might not be the best if our aim is to have a good time on planet Earth. So we ought to explore different types of games in order to coordinate behavior between people, and we ought to explore new states of mind when engaging with other people for doing economic activity. Another problem with game theory is that whenever we talk about this utility function, is that we most often have already decided what the utility is, that it's some sort of dollar value that we all try to maximize. And my point here is that a dollar value or a fiat value isn't the one true value that we should all strive to maximize. I mean, we should question what biases dollars have. And I think this relates quite nicely to the anthropological theory of value. So the anthropological theory of value, or my take on it, is being put forth by David Graeber. Essentially, deconstructing the notion of value and looking at how value relates to values, and looking at different tokens, and now in the general sense, not just as in a cryptocurrency token, but tokens as being a representation of value. And then we can have many forms of value being represented in different ways. We can have the value of education being represented in the form of a university diploma. We can have the value of labor being represented in fiat or cryptocurrencies. We have the value of art being represented in an artist retrospective, and you know, so on. And the thing about all of these values are, there's a couple of points that I think are valuable lessons to take out from the anthropological theory of value. One of which, perhaps the most important and a kind of perverse thing that happens whenever we represent a value in a token, is that people start pursuing the token itself rather than the value that it represents. So even though we have formed this token of a university diploma in order to represent the value of education, pretty soon what happens is that people pursue the token itself. People go to university to get the diploma rather than to get the education that the diploma is supposed to represent. The same thing happens with fiat currency or currencies in general, is that instead of giving them out to people for working, or instead of valuing the work that we're doing that is supposed to be represented by the currency, we start working in order to get the currency. And so maybe this is an obvious type of behavior for many, but I think it's worth noticing that this is something that happens whenever we manifest these values into a token. Another point that comes out of this body of research is that in all of these different notions of value, in all of the arenas, as they call it, you sort of believe that the one notion of value that is represented in that arena is the most important value. That if you're in academia, then you value education and science more than anything else, and you believe that all of these other forms of value, like currency, should only be strived for insofar as they bring you more of your notion of value. You know, you're pursuing art for art's sake. You're pursuing science for the sake of science. You're not pursuing science for the sake of making money. If you're in the arena of making money, then you might pursue making money for the sake of making money. But you know, all of these arenas are pursuing their own values and believe that their own value is the most important notion of value. And so then politics can be said to be the internal arrangement of these various notions of value. That politics is supposed to, or politics is essentially the business of determining whether the economy is more important than science, or whether art is the one true notion of value that you should pursue. Okay, so the important part to get out of this from the perspective of circles and universal basic income is that currencies are not unbiased. In their design, there is a particular notion of value that they are encoding. And our main point is that the design of the monetary system does not accurately reflect the values of our society. That there is a bias in the dollar or in the fiat currencies of the world, and they don't really reflect the values that we have as a society. Not only are they favored, they favor the few, but they're also controlled by the few. They are not democratically controlled, they're essentially technocratically controlled. We have a bunch of economists making decisions about the way money is issued, and we don't have much to say about it. There's rarely democratic elections that actually try to change the way money is issued. Yes?
Yes, so in what ways the money is biased? The money itself is not biased. The money, you have the money, you can buy it. biased, because
Yeah.
money itself is not biased. It's just a matter of exchange.
Yeah.
I can give you a cow if you want instead of US dollars, but most probably you will not accept this cow because, you know, what can you do with a cow? You put it in the fridge, but you still need the gas to run it, so, you know.
Yeah, so when I talk about the money being biased, I talk about the design of the monetary system being constructed in a certain way. The way in which people can issue money is specific to the dollar. I mean, the way dollars are issued is different from the way cows are issued. Like you can raise a new cow and now all of a sudden you have more money than to begin with, but you can't issue your own dollars. People won't recognize that as being true dollars. So there's a particular schema by which dollars or most fiat currencies are issued, and that's through fractional reserve banking, and that is what I think the real bias is.
But this is still not the problem. I mean, this is my personal opinion.
Okay.
If you give everyone every month $1,000, I don't care how much they issue, how much dollars they issue every month, unless there's a hyperinflation, of course, because $1,000 is worth nothing. But let's forget about the hyperinflation. If the inflation rate is 2%, every citizen of the world gets $1,000 per month, whatever. So money is okay. I don't care what they do.
So if that was the way in which money was issued, then money would have different characteristics. We would look at money in a different way because the design of the monetary system would be different. And this is actually what I'm arguing for, that this should be the issue scheme for money. We should issue money at the ground level to give it to people rather than to issue money through institutions. But the point here is only that the choices we make in terms of issuance are going to affect the nature of the economy. And that we can't think of money as being unbiased because through the design of the monetary system, we get a certain bias.
I mean, we can argue about it and philosophize, but it would take too long, so maybe afterwards the discussion will.
I mean, that's like the one.
Just to be the
okay.
background, so
yeah.
I'm not just saying something out of thin air. So even if you do whatever you want, give $1,000 to everyone, this money will lose value. Because if I have $1,000 and I want something more than you, I will pay and offer you more for this product. And this is how the inflation is created, and hyperinflation is created. So it's not a problem of the current monetary system. The problem is that I can't get a certain basic universal basic income where it needs to come out of a certain value. You can't just, if you're just giving money away out of thin air, all you will do is, doesn't matter, fractional reserve, ECB, Croatia national bank, you will create a hyperinflation. You need to have something, someone needs to pay. There must be a debit and a credit. And I think the solution of UBI is data. Data is valuable. And this is one possible solution of UBI to mine. Everything else is going to be hyperinflationary. This happened in Yugoslavia at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay, so that's getting to a lot of issues at the same time, and I haven't gotten even to the universal basic income part. The only point that I'm trying to make here is one that it seems that you're agreeing with, is that the design of the monetary system is going to affect the properties of money and the properties of the economy, and therefore we should be really careful in the design of that. And it seems like you were agreeing with that because you were saying that if we were to issue helicopter money or you know, just give out money for free, then it would affect the properties of money. It would be hyperinflationary, and you know, that's a property of money that would be a result of the way that we design the scheme. And I'm questioning the design of the scheme, asking if we can do better.
Sorry.
Yep.
I have a question. So can we use the universal basic income system to pay out the public debt for our citizens? So basically we use the universal basic income to pay out public debt.
Let me finish describing our scheme because I'm running a little bit out of time, and then we can take a discussion later. Because I think these are really good questions, but I haven't really described what Circles is. So I think I've managed to convince at least some of you that the design of a monetary system does affect the properties of money, And so if we want to design a currency that captures different notions of value than the current monetary system, then what are the values that we would like to capture? Well, essentially, we value people and equality. To many, these would be fairly uncontroversial points, but the way in which this is captured, or our design goals for Circles, I think whenever somebody introduces a new currency, they should be really well motivated. And these are our motivations for why any currencies we have seen so far doesn't really live up to the values that we're trying to capture. We're essentially trying to achieve a fair pre-distribution to all. And so by pre-distribution here, I mean the issuance of money, and if there is a continuous minting, then the allocation of the newly minted tokens. So there should be no proper subset of actors that are benefiting unequally from the issuance of money. The issuance of money should be something that is given to everybody at an equal share. And the early mover advantage is, well, it's related to this in the sense that if you're an early mover, then if you're getting too big of an advantage, then that advantage should be mitigated as far as possible. And this is what qualifies most cryptocurrencies, because do I have this slide somewhere? Yeah. We talk a lot about cryptocurrencies offering decentralization, but really if we look at the distribution of wealth in the Bitcoin network, for example, it's extremely skewed. So the claim that cryptocurrencies are offering a more decentralized distribution of wealth should really be questioned. So I'll quickly describe the aim or the architecture of Circles, and then we can argue about it later. So Circles is a cryptocurrency which has a fairly simple goal of making the pre-distribution of money fairly distributed to everybody. And the way that this is achieved is that users are continuously given newly minted tokens of a personal currency. This currency is unique to every user in the system, and this is how we attack the Sybil problem of the problem of some user spinning up multiple accounts. Then would they not receive multiple basic incomes, and therefore it wouldn't be fair? Well, in our system, they do receive multiple basic incomes then, but they would all be different personal currencies. And the only way that you can engage in affairs with other people in the system is if they trust you. So you build a network of trust in order to make exchange viable between people. And then if you have 10 accounts that are all receiving 10 different personal currencies, it doesn't matter, because the only one that you can actually trade with people with is the one that is trusted by other people. And people won't be trusting all 10 of your accounts. They will only associate the currency, one of these currencies with you, and the rest of them they will basically value as worthless. So trusting somebody means that you accept their currency as worth one-to-one with your own, and so therefore within these networks of trust you are getting a basic income, or you are getting a monetary system in which the distribution of money, the allocation of money is fairly distributed. There's transitive transfers that can make this trust network a little bit larger. I'm going to skip that in the interest of time. And I want to leave some time for questions. So I'll also just gloss over the aspect of community currencies. The point that I'm trying to make here is that if we start with a monetary system which is built from people, then we're building a decentralized system, and whenever we do so, we need to also have a way of governing that system. Otherwise, we might run into a lot of problems. So if you're building a decentralized system generally, then you should also have a decentralized way of upgrading that system or changing that system in order to really make it last. So it's kind of impossible to decouple a monetary system from a governance system. And the governance of our system comes into play here at the community currency level. A community currency is essentially a group of people with their individual currencies coming together, making decisions on who is part of the group, what the monetary policy of the group is, and so on. And just to say a couple of things about universal basic income and why it's important. It has all of these really nice social benefits like reducing crime, poverty, inequality, improves health. There's citations at the end of this presentation that I will share on Twitter. Most interestingly, I think the thing that comes with a universal basic income is a decoupling between labor and compensation. And so the sort of modus operandi of every political party, or every major political party, I should say, is to create more jobs. But really, I think that's sort of antithetical to what it means to be humans. We shouldn't be striving for creating more jobs. We should be striving for making the creation of goods and services more efficient so that we can spend time doing the things that we like rather than just working for the sake of working. Some common misconceptions about universal basic income is that it makes people into couch potatoes and makes them spend more money on drugs and alcohol, or alcohol being a drug, but you know, there are some studies there if you guys are believers of that, and you should look into those. So I'll just end on sort of a call to arms, and then we'll take questions. And this call to arms is really questioning what this space is turning into in terms of what society we're trying to build. I mean, one of the essential first ideological messages that were put forth by Bitcoin was this headline included in the Genesis blog in 2009. I mean, an obvious critique against bailouts and perhaps the monetary system in general. And so we should really look closely at the social promises that people are saying that the blockchain is giving, of decentralization, of democratization, of reducing all of these kinds of social problems that exist, and really look at whether that is being achieved or not. Because so far, the main thing that blockchains have brought is a transfer of wealth to a lot of white males, and we've seen that before, and that's not super interesting. Okay, that was my last slide. I'll take questions now. So I have time for one question, apparently. One question.
If you say that you're basically giving people out currencies,
Yeah.
how are you not interested in having, let's say, for lack of a better expression, trust farms,
where somebody would get in India and farm trust and then sell that account or that currency to somebody else, and you could have multiple valuable currencies owned by the same person.
So you mean that they would get actual people and have people trust and then steal their currencies?
In many online games today have farms that generate in-game items of cash.
Yeah. I mean, that would be something that not we as builders of the system would try to prevent, more than that the notion of what it means to trust another person is going to be dependent on what sort of behavior that they're taking. And so if you are trusting these 10 people in India, or whatever your example was, then you would need to know those people, and you would be able to see that the currency that they're using is actually, something that they are having and that they are given, and not something that somebody else has control over. The people that you're trusting are people that you should be certain are receiving one basic income, and one basic income only. I think I only had time for one question. I'm sorry. We can talk after. Okay, I can. Okay, so can I hear your question?
Okay, so in discussion of trust.
We can.
Oh no, I think we could. We can.
Later.
We can. One question.
So it's a very short question. It's regarding the trust. So we see trust only on a personal level, or do you think there's necessary reputational system like you have it in colony maybe, or like citizen score in China?
Yeah, there's definitely ways in which you can delegate your trust to somebody else, in particular an institution that essentially offers trust as a service. And I think realistically this is the way that the system is going to be governed in practice, because most people, when they're dealing with money, don't want to go around and like say whoever is in their trust network. They probably want to subscribe to some service that says these are all people that are legit, you can trust them, and they're part of your network now. But the important thing is that those services should be opt-in and not opt-out. Okay, thank you very much. If you have more questions, then grab a hold of me. Thank you.